You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
And today we have our first HouseCall show of the weekend. So we, again, have 8 great questions coming up this weekend. I have 4 today. A couple of them are a few parts each. We'll absolutely get to all those different parts. And we are almost all caught up with questions. So the great thing is, if you send in your question this weekend, it'll most likely be ready for next week's show. And to get your question answered, all you have to do is go to stephencabral.com/Ask Cabral. And that's typically right on the show notes page as well. Today is show 287. It's amazing. We're already up to 287 shows. So again, if you want your question answered, please do feel free to go there. I answer them either just with your first name or as anonymous. So just always feel free to ask anything that you've never been able to get your answer to. And I'm happy to do my best to answer that for you. All right. So let's get started. Our first question is from Suzanna. Suzanna is asking, hi, thanks for all your invaluable info. I'm a personal trainer and listen to your podcast using a lot of your advice to help my own clients. Excellent job. Glad to hear that. I was listening to 4th November, so the November 4th podcast about juicing, where you mentioned the ketogenic diet. You said you don't agree with it long term and that you don't use it for more than 3 weeks with your clients. Would you please elaborate on this and tell me your reasons? I ask because firstly, I thought it took more than 3 weeks to actually get into nutritional ketosis, so wondered why you stopped the diet so soon. And secondly, I myself have been eating keto for 2.5 years. My blood was recently checked, thyroid, sugar, liver, all those different things. And just going to talk about yourself. And then you talk about if I eat carbs, it's in the form of sweet potatoes, carrots, apples, etc. I find difficult to stop eating. I also get bloated, constipation, and just feel terrible. Okay. So, Susanna, we've got a bunch of things to go over right now for you. All right. So here's the big thing. And this is no fault of your own. It is absolutely not. It is an industry-based thing. We are talking about 2 different things between low carb and a ketogenic diet. So again, it's obviously semantics, right? Because some people's paleo diet does not include any nuts, it doesn't include any beans, and some people's paleo diet does include nuts and does include beans. And so it's kind of like, what are we really talking about? Like there's no specific thing. My idea of a ketogenic diet, which hopefully is the idea of a ketogenic diet, is that your body actually goes into ketosis. So it actually starts making ketones. That is hopefully the definition of a ketogenic diet. But a lot of people are on a low carb diet. 2 totally different things. I think that's really important that we just talk about that right up front. I do believe in a low carb diet initially for a lot of clients, and it has been proven to work exceptionally well for weight loss. However, people do plateau on a low carb diet, and for a lifetime, not so great. But also keep in mind, low carb for who? Meaning like if you have an endomorphic body type, it makes a whole lot of sense to get most of your carbs from vegetables. But if you're an ectomorph, you need more carbohydrates. You do fantastic, typically, with fruit. You have no issues with blood sugar regulation, and you have no issues with insulin. You have issues, actually, with adrenal-based and hormone-based function when you don't get enough carbs. And if you go on a ketogenic diet as a Vata body type or ectomorph, you make your body sick. Literally, you get sick from it. So, again, the first question always says, for whom is the keto-based diet best for? And, or are we talking low carb? That's another thing. And then also, one other point I want to make is that ketosis does not take 3 weeks to get into. So when you look at glucose stores in your body, you're looking at somewhere around, again, it varies per person, 70 to 120 grams of glucose in the liver. You've got around 70 to 100 or so in your bloodstream, and that's it. So you can tap into that and tap out of that pretty quickly. Like you could go to ketosis in a day if you started doing exercise and you just cut off completely from your carbohydrates and protein as well. A lot of people are eating a lot of protein. That you're not going to get into a good ketogenic state with a high protein diet as well. Predominantly, all of your calories do have to come from fat. So the other thing is that when you are in a keto-based state let me just step back a bit. Typical person can get into ketosis in about 2 to 4 days. That's for most people. Okay. Now, just keep in mind, a keto-based diet, when we're talking about can the body use ketones as an energy source? Yes. But what happens, it is the survival mode, right? So 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, nobody chose to be in a ketogenic state. They were in a ketogenic state because typically of starvation, and the body, it again can start to tap into more body fat stores, and yes, it can start to produce ketones. But it is acidifying. The only reason your blood doesn't become more acidic is because your body then has to use minerals to buffer that. And yes, those minerals can come from your bones and they can come from your muscles. But also, if you had your blood levels, great, but you should also be testing your adrenal levels, and that means you should be testing cortisol. For some people, it can put them in more of a catabolic state. They can actually lose muscle mass. Yes, body fat, but also muscle mass, because you can tap into that for amino acids and sugar. And it does a lot of things, again, to that HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So I look at it as a survival-based diet. I don't look at it as thriving. Has it been shown to be potentially beneficial if you have tumors or certain types of cancer? Yes. But if you don't have tumors or certain types of cancer, it doesn't mean you need to be on this diet. And it also doesn't mean that you're going to prevent it, because that's a hard-based cancer. This is getting way too technical, but hard-based cancers are tumors. Soft-based cancers are actually catabolic-based cancers. So I don't think the jury's out yet. It's too young. And also, it honestly, from a lifestyle and overall perspective, it's not needed. Like you talked about not feeling well and getting bloated and constipated from eating certain carbohydrates, even healthy ones. And the reason is most likely not the carbohydrates' fault. It's you have some type of bacterial overgrowth. You have some type of gut dysbiosis, an imbalance between good and bad bacteria. You most likely have weakened or low digestion in your stomach. And what happens is that food starts to ferment. So you're fermenting it because of yeast or bacterial overgrowth or weakened digestion, so it stays in your stomach too long. It's not the carbohydrates. It is actually the digestion. So I think I answered a lot there. So hopefully that gives you a place to start. And remember, this podcast is about a place to start, right? So the HouseCall, these are 10-minute shows, 15-minute shows, maximum even on the HouseCalls of 20 minutes. I want to give you a place to start, right? I want you to learn to think differently. I have no agenda. I'm not selling anything. I have products. I have things that I use in my own clinic here in Boston, but there's no obligation ever to use anything that I promote. My goal is to get you to think differently and to start to take control of your overall health. If I do that, and then you learn something and you can pass it on to someone else, I mean, that's what this is all about. Really, that's what it's all about. I'm paying this forward. I learned from great people, and then I just took it to that next level, studied all over the world, read thousands of books, all those different things. And it's simply because this is my life. This is what I'm passionate about. It's what I love. And I would do this even if I had all the money in the world. This is my life. This is what I love to do. All right, let's get on to the next question. It's from Dan. Dan says, "Good afternoon, Stephen. Thank you for taking your time to share your knowledge in your podcast. I've always wondered about water. 2/3 of our body is made up of water. What is the best type of water to drink? There is purified by reverse osmosis with minerals added, which I think is the best. My chiropractor tells me I should be drinking Kangen water, which is ionized alkaline water, and I am familiar with that. I will answer that. There is mineral water, spring water, distilled water. What about tap water with a Brita or pure filter? Please offer your insight to which type of water would give our bodies the hydration that it operates best with. Thank you." All right, Dan, great question and good timing. Yesterday's show, you have to tune into this, 286, StephenCabral.com/286. It answers every single question you asked and then some. The only thing it did not touch on, so yesterday's podcast was why you need a water filter and the best ones to get. So literally, I give you ranges from about $40 to up to like $1,500. And again, there's prices all in between. So, Dan, here's the thing. I'm going to give different brackets for each person, but I talked about yesterday all of the harmful things that are in our tap water. I mean, it is awful. It should be criminal, but really, I mean, our government has been bought and paid for by big business. So they allow these heavy metals in water. They allow aluminum and lead and arsenic, and they allow chlorine and fluoride and, I mean, pharmaceutical drugs, all of these things in our water, and it's outrageous, and it's all proven. Like, this isn't me just saying, oh, this is a conspiracy. No, I only talk about things that are proven on this podcast. And if it's not proven yet, I will say, well, this is anecdotal evidence. However, it's been used for thousands of years in traditional Chinese medicine, Taoist medicine, or Ayurvedic medicine, or any, type of medicine like that. So anyway, this is proven. If you're not using a water filter, or you're not drinking fresh spring water, you are doing yourself a great disservice. And Dan, you are correct. If you use reverse osmosis, you should stir back in the trace mineral drops. That's it. Very, very simple, very easy to do. You literally just put the drops in and you spin that water to create a vortex to get that to circulate and mix with the water. Again, I might be pronouncing it incorrectly, but I know exactly what you're talking about. The Kagan, or again, I could be pronouncing it incorrectly. I'm not an advocate of changing our water, right? I understand you're adding more minerals to the water with the alkaline-based water. With this one specifically, sometimes they add more calcium to the water. Calcium, if you add calcium to water, again, I'm not specifically talking about this one, Kagan, okay? I'm not doing a review on that product. I just want to make that clear. But a lot of alkaline waters, you're adding calcium to the water or certain minerals, but they're hard minerals that would be taken from like calcium carbonate. It's an inexpensive form. It has been shown if you take in calcium carbonate to harden the arteries, but yes, it is more alkaline. Alkaline does not necessarily mean better unless it comes from nature. For example, the Saka water that I've recommended before, it's naturally 8.22, right? That's the pH level. Neutral is about 7.14. The blood's at 7.356. So when you look at that, yes, it is more alkaline. That actually it means good. You can drink that between meals, but you wouldn't want to drink an alkaline substance really with a large meal or a meal in general protein because you want the stomach too a little bit more acidic. Not going to have a huge difference and impact, but something to look at. But Dan, literally everything I answered on the Friday review, and no need to buy a couple $1,000 machines in my opinion. And the reason is I want as pure to nature as I can get, right? As pure to nature as I can find. Okay, Sonia is up next. Hello, thanks for putting out such informative podcasts. We listen to you all the time. We recently learned about DIM to help with estrogen dominance and how it helps too, and I would really like to find out what your thoughts are. Also, if this is something you recommend, are there brands you recommend? Thank you so much in advance, Sonia. Thank you, Sonia, for the question. It is a fantastic question. And yes, this is a product that I recommend and sometimes use in my practice in Boston. First, what I'd like to do is simply tell you a little bit about the product. So DIM stands for diindol methane. And what it is, it's a component that's related to another chemical that is a little bit more well-known called indole 3-carbinol. And so what these things do is they can actually help, believe it or not, prevent breast, uterine, and colorectal cancer, but they also help men too with prostate-based inflammation or prostate hypertrophy. And one other item that I've seen it help really great amount with is with any type of premenstrual syndrome-based symptoms such as acne or bloating or maybe irritability, certain items like that. So I've seen it work great with that. I don't use it a lot in my practice, and I'm going to tell you why. So it does work, and you can absolutely use it. Here's why. It's used as an estrogen. Well, it doesn't block estrogen, but it does not allow as great a conversion to estrogen in the body. So that's extremely helpful for both men and women. So here's one of the bigger things, though, is a lot of women have estrogen dominance, and that's where they're getting all of these issues from. So I lab test and I say, okay, you have all of the issues of estrogen dominance. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do an adrenal hormone saliva test. We're going to take your cortisol. It's 4 times during the day. We're going to take your estrogen progesterone around 5 to 7 days before day 1 of menstruation or your period. That's going to tell me what your highest level of progesterone should be, and it's going to tell me when your estrogen should be basically at its lowest. That's when you'll have PMS-based symptoms. And also, that is when progesterone should be at its highest and estrogen at its lowest. So I'm going to get to see the ratio of progesterone to estrogen because that's the best way to say, is there estrogen dominance in the body? Because there absolutely should be estrogen dominance for the first half of your cycle, first 15 days or so, but not after that. So here's what I find. almost 10 out of 10 times, not 9 out of 10 times, almost 10 out of 10 times, is that estrogen is normal. Right? Estrogen is normal, but progesterone is so low that it looks like estrogen is actually high. So progesterone so low, estrogen then becomes dominant. Not because you have too much estrogen in your body, because you have too little progesterone, which means the ratio is off. So when the ratio is off, when you have low progesterone to estrogen, then that means that you technically then have high estrogen in your body, but not because you're producing too much estrogen, simply because you're not producing enough progesterone. And if we want to take it a little deeper down the rabbit hole, you are producing a normal amount of progesterone. However, it's being funneled down to cortisol because progesterone is a direct precursor to 17-hydroxyprogesterone, which then becomes high cortisol in the body. So once you know all of these specific things and how the body works, you can then help women with these issues without having to always use maybe as much supplements. Because really what we're trying to do is not necessarily... Essentially, you're trying to raise progesterone rather than just lower estrogen. That should be your goal. So, because here's the thing, if you actually have normal estrogen, why lower it? I understand the logic that you're having these symptoms of high estrogen, but really when you go one layer, like when you peel back that onion and you go deeper and deeper, which is what my practice is all about, the real underlying root causes. So some people would say underlying root cause is high estrogen. I would say, yeah, you're correct, but there's more layers below that. You would say, okay, well then the underlying root cause is low progesterone. I would say, absolutely, you are correct. But now there's one more layer below that. And the layer below that is that there's some type of stressor right now on the body, whether physiological, exogenous, endogenous within the body or without, usually a combination of both, that needs to be corrected. And once you stop being in such a high cortisol state, or at least high stress-based state, you're going to then allow progesterone levels to rise. And I do that literally all the time with women with any type of issues that resemble high estrogen dominance. So that's a long answer. You can certainly do the saliva-based test, then you get my specific recommendations. But in the meantime, if you did want to use an estrogen symptom blocker like DIM or DIM, you can use a product by Orthomolecular Medicine. There's a lot of great companies, but remember, don't go with one on Amazon. Go with a functional medicine-based product from a real company, that third-party test that you make sure you know what you're getting. And that's Estrodim, Estrodim. I don't get any kickbacks from Orthomolecular Medicine. They're just a good company and they have good products. Again, Thorne's a great company. There's a lot of great companies out there, but you know what? I'll link some up in the show notes because this show is going to be here a year from now, 2 years from now. So we'll always go to the show notes page because you're going to get my best recommendations as I update that as well. So hopefully that answers your question. And of course, probably gives you a little bit more to think about than you might have expected. Okay. Last question of the day. How do you do detox in the fall when juicing, smoothies are your enemy and all you want is soup? So basically this person, what they're asking, this is from Elizabeth. She's asking, during the warm weather, I don't really want to do a smoothie. I want to do like something warm and comforting. Totally agree with you. Totally understand where you're coming from. In the wintertime, I start to add more ginger to my smoothies, and I also add cayenne pepper to my juices. So I still want the benefit of doing a smoothie a day because remember, you can't pack that much nutrition into anything else. You simply can't eat that much. So if you're doing like the greens powder, that's 22 fruits and vegetables, right? The daily fruits and vegetable blend. If you're doing an all-in-one, well, that's your multi, that's your antioxidants, your electrolytes, your 15 grams of your vegan pea-based protein powder, and the daily nutritional support. So I still want that every day, but I do agree I want something warm for my body. So again, I throw in that ginger, I put some lemon in there, I make it a little spicy, that heats up my body. But I can also, on the side, I can do a little bit of gluten-free oatmeal if I choose to, and that's warm, that's comforting. I can do a little bit of cinnamon on that if I choose to. I don't do a lot of cinnamon, but it's great for most people for blood sugar and for antioxidant, all those benefits. I swing towards too high histamines and in the past and too many issues with that. But again, I'm that rare person who just has a lot of sensitivities. You are probably going to be fine with it. So do the cinnamon, do all that great stuff. So that's what you can do. That's my recommendations. And then you can still do the soup. There's nothing wrong with doing soup, but you can do soup all throughout the day. Probably not. You might do soup for dinner, and that's a really nice thing at the end of the day. Very easy to digest, very heartening, and also, like I said, it's warming, it's comforting, and it's easy to digest. Really great for the winter as well. So hopefully that answered everyone's questions today. Make sure you do come back. Tune in tomorrow. I have 4 more questions for you, all very, very different, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you then. Before you go, I wanted to share a personal story with you. The real reason I began to get well finally is because I figured out what was wrong with me. And that might seem pretty obvious, but I went from doctor to doctor for over 2 years before discovering at-home functional medicine lab testing. These are the labs that enabled me to finally figure out what was wrong with my hormones, blood sugar, electrolytes, and gut health. And once I knew what was wrong, I could then follow a proven plan in order to rebalance my body from the inside out. This is why I believe so strongly in functional medicine lab testing and why I've made it my mission to share these labs with the world. Now at equa.life, you can order an at-home lab test or lab bundle for you and your family and be able to complete it within the week. Plus, the EquaLife difference is that you're not left to try to read and figure out these labs on your own. We explain what your lab numbers mean, what they mean in the much bigger picture, and then how to go about rebalancing your body in order to heal. To see our full selection of lab tests or to set up a free lab selection call to find out what labs may be best for you, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. And do remember, we ship these all over the world. To find out more and to set up your free lab selection call, simply head on over to equa.life/labs. That's EQUI.LIFE/labs.